Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became Emperor of the West and lived to destroy Konoha Part 5. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. South Ichiyama, Unified Western Empire, 2 months later. Following Naruto's appearance at the Cage Summit and him delivering the invites to the cages in Mifune, Tsunade had returned to Konoha and summoned the council to tell them of this recent development. Sasuke Uchiha was the first to volunteer with Danzu's backing. Yugao Azuki and Asuma Sarutobi also signed on, as his rehab would be finished by then and he would be placed back on active duty. Last, was Sakura Haruno. Accompanying Tsunade and her team to South Ichiyama was Jiraiya and a representative from the Fire Daimyo. South Ichiyama was one of the southern region's largest cities, home to a thriving tourist industry. The largest city in the southern region was home to several casinos, geisha houses, and even a brothel. The city itself was built around a small mountain, the mountain itself now the largest stadium on the continent. It was also the site of the final battle of the Unification Wars, and the site of where Naruto and Hinata's forces had signed the treaty which ended the Unification Wars and had brought a new age to the West. Tears Point, the memorial shrine built to honor the casualties of the Unification Wars, was located 3 miles away from where the treaty was signed. It was also the eve of the Imperial Kumite, the annual tournament that the unified Western Empire held once a year. The best of the best were invited to compete for honor, wealth and prestige in the imperial nation. It made the preliminary Chunin tournament that Konoha had held during Naruto and Hinata's time as genin look like a schoolyard fight. The Imperial Kumite was no holds barred, anything goes. Jutsu and weapons were allowed. Bloodline-based abilities were allowed, and the Ichiyama Coliseum was specifically designed for that purpose. Neji Hyuga and Rock Lee had fought in the Imperial Kumite the first time in the previous year. Suffice to say, they both learned quick that the fighters played for keeps. Despite making it to the semi-finals, Neji was defeated by the year's previous champion, and Rock Lee was beaten by Takeshi Chiba. This time around, the former Raikage decided not to join in the fray, but rather watch from the sidelines. This year, however, the Kumite was different, as this time the 5 major shinobi villages were invited to the tournament. However, the tournament had a secondary purpose, as it had something to do with Operation Scorched Leaf. That secondary purpose was the humiliation of Konohagakure no Sato, the Godime Hokage, Fire Country and last, Sasuke Uchiha. With this final humiliation, Sasuke would do his part and leave for Otogakure no Sato. South Ichiyama was also the summer home of the emperor, the imperial villa being the summer palace of the emperor and empress consort. A good portion of the summer was spent in the southern region, beginning at the tail end of the Unification Festival, as Naruto and Hinata inspected the Pakara merchant houses in the region and visited the villages. It was half the size of the imperial complex, but it was still spacious enough for the Namikaze clan and their guests. Naruto and Hinata Namikaze had arrived in South Ichiyama a week earlier with their child, Minato. Hiyashi Hyuga, Hanabi Hyuga, Neji and Tenten Hyuga also accompanied them, along with little Hazashi. In the year following their arrival in the West, Hiyashi had become a respected member of the Imperial Council. Hanabi had taken over as head of the Hyuga clan, and was a powerful kunoichi in her own right. It was even rumored that she was romantically involved with Takeshi Chiba. Neji had become the commander of the military police assigned to protect Kimen and the surrounding areas. His wife, Tenten, was a valued member of Yugito's Hellcats. Hiyashi and the council knew of Operation Scorched Leaf, and had given Naruto and Hinata their full blessings on the matter. Aside from the occasional threat from Konohagakure and from the Fire Daimyo, they could do nothing. When Tsunade threatened to invade both Wave and Spring, Naruto had retaliated by threatening to unleash the Hiraishin upon Konohagakure's shinobi. If his father had killed 300 Iwa shinobi in the last war, then what would happen if he used the Hiraishin with a couple of shadow clones? Imperial Villa, South Ichiyama, Nighttime. Although smaller than the Imperial Palace in Kimen, the Imperial Villa was more than spacious enough to accommodate the extra guests. Aside from the Namikaze family, there were Naruto's in-laws and the Ino Shika Cho trio came to visit, Haku tagging along with Ino. Ino was competing in the Imperial Kumite, as her opponent, through Naruto's machinations, was Sakura Haruno. Shikamaru and Choji were not competing this year. Gaara's due to arrive tomorrow. From what Tamari has told me, Shikamaru said as they sat inside the courtyard, Ino and Tenten were playing with Minato and Hazashi. The Godime will also be accompanied by representatives from the Wind Daimyo's council. Just in time for the start of the Kumite, Naruto said. Just so you know, Tsunade and the Konoha fire group has arrived earlier today, Ino continued. Sasuke was among the group. That, and Asuma almost got into a fight with Okajima-sensei when Asuma saw him with us. I know, Naruto replied. The Tengu came to me to, personally request, that he would be the one to fight Asuma in the Kumite. And I've granted it. Isn't this troublesome? I mean stacking the deck against Konoha on purpose. Shikamaru asked. If I wanted to be unfair, I would have the 4 Devas compete in the tournament, Naruto explained. But there's the other 4 shinobi villages. I really don't have to turn the odds in the West's favor. Inviting the other nations here is nothing more than an act of goodwill, to show the naysayers that my intentions are genuine. Well, that and the prize money is far too tempting to ignore. Jiraiya has been seen sneaking around Ichiyama, Hiashi said. My guess is to check out the competition, to see which of the fighters from here and from the other villages is a major threat to Konoha winning. 1-year-old Minato gurgled while in Ino's arms. Wouldn't put it past the perv to try and sneak in here, Naruto said. Following the confrontation in Iron Country, Jiraiya had found out through a contact of his in Spring Country that Koyuki was the godson to Naruto and Hinata's child, who was named after Konoha's greatest hero. Jiraiya was furious, as was Tsunade. But they could no do anything, as Tsunade remembered Naruto's threat from the Cage Summit. If you wish to go to war, I'll be more than happy to oblige you. You are already on thin ice with me for betraying not only my parents, but also the Uzumaki clan. If you declare war on the Empire out of some misguided attempt at revenge, Gaara's desert burial will look merciful compared to what the Imperial nation can do. You go to war with me, I guarantee that Konohagakure will be nothing more than a memory. The leaf will be nothing more but a rumor. It will have never existed. Hiashi decided to change the subject. So this is the city where you and Naruto had gotten married during the final battle. When his daughter and son-in-law nodded, he went on. You know, Minato proposed to Kushina in the midst of a skirmish with a group of Nukenin just as the last shinobi war had started. I was there, as I was your father's former teammate. Seeing as how the others were looking on in interest, Naruto and Hinata nodded. The Emperor took Minato from Ino as Hinata began to tell the story, the baby gurgling as it took handfuls of his father's hair. South Ichiyama was the final stronghold of the remaining 3 warlords, Hinata began. We had been fighting long and hard for 2 long years, uniting the West. South Ichiyama was the last. Winner takes all. If we won, the West would finally be at peace. If we lost, then the West would revert back to where we had found it when we arrived. The 3 warlords, Oboa, Rama and Joe, were minor warlords, but they combined their forces and fortified the city. Always, before a battle, Naruto would offer terms to his opponents. The terms of surrender were generous, as they had always been, which was the main reason why we were successful to begin with. Come to his side willingly and fight for a greater cause, to bring peace to the lands. Joe was the smart one. He came to our side. Oboa and Rama wanted a fight, and we obliged. The battle raged for 3 hours, Naruto continued, smiling both at his son, who was now asleep, and at the memory. Oboa and Rama were holed up inside the stadium, and we had the place surrounded. It was Kurama, Hinata, Haku, Zabuza and myself leading the charge. Flashback. South Ichiyama, the conclusion of the Unification Wars. Naruto Namikaze and Hinata Hyuga were fighting back to back, Naruto with his Okatana and Hiraishin kunais, while Hinata had her Byakugan activated, and Kukri knives in her hands. Nearby, Zabuza Mamachi and Haku were fighting with members of Zabuza's Demon Brigade, and Yugito Ni teamed up with Kurama in taking down the enemy troops. Suddenly, Naruto had a moment of inspiration. Fortune favors the bold, as Sanshi once told him. He spun Hinata around, slashing at a samurai with his Okatana. Hinata, marry me. Had this been at any other time, Hinata would have squealed like a schoolgirl. Had she been a genin, she would have fainted. But they were in the middle of a heated battle, one that would forever decide the fate of the West. Now, this isn't the best time. She shouted back. Are you kidding? Naruto shot back, blocking an incoming blade with his sword and stabbing the offending samurai with his kunai, leaving it embedded in his throat. Now may be the only time. I love you, Hinata, and I've made my choice. What's yours? Hinata's Byakugan deactivated. She had admired Naruto for a long time, and that admiration had turned to love following their banishment. He believed in her, and he loved her. In return, she loved him back. Kurama, Hinata shouted to the red-headed woman. Marry us. Her 9 fox tails waving around her body as if they had a life of their own, Kurama had slashed her way through a group of shinobi, even going as far as to impale them and fling their bodies away by using her tails. I'm indisposed at the moment. Naruto saw that Yugito was close by, fighting on a raised platform alongside Zabuza. Yugito, he shouted, taking Hinata's hand. Marry us. Now. Now, was Yugito's reply. Yes. Now, Hinata shouted, impaling a shinobi with her kukri. Make it quick. Fine then, Yugito shouted. Taking a minor break from the fighting, with Zabuza backing her, she conducted the impromptu ceremony as Naruto and Hinata continued to fight. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to nail you to the wall. Zabuza interrupted, impaling his opponent with the head-chopping cleaver before kicking him off the blade. After hacking several shinobi into Western kibble, Naruto grasped Hinata's free hand again. Do you, Hinata Hyuga, take me to be your husband? Hinata nodded eagerly. Yes. Awesome. Naruto rejoiced, right before planting a Rasengan into a shinobi attempting to attack Hinata from behind. At the same time, Hinata flung her remaining kukri into another samurai trying to cheap-shot Naruto. Naruto retrieved Hinata's kukri and tossed it back to her. Do you, Naruto Namikaze? Hinata began, pausing to Jiyuken strike a shinobi in the heart, take me to be your wife. For better or worse, and in sickness and in health. You mean with the last part about health being less likely? Naruto replied. I do. Great. Hinata rejoiced as more fighting ensued, forcing the couple to fight back to back. As Hellcat General, Yugito concluded, I pronounce you husband and. She stopped as she caught a kunai from the air and tossed it back to the offending party, killing her instantly. You may kiss. She attempted again, but had to flip off the platform to avoid being attacked from the sides. After dispatching the both of them with Zabuza's help, she tried to speak again. You may kiss. Once again, she was interrupted. However, Haku and his ice Senbon had made the save. On the ground below, the fighting intensified as the body count around Naruto and Hinata grew, Naruto having to create some space using the Shinra Tensei, blowing the attackers back. This time, Yugito and Zabuza turned to the young couple. Just kiss. The former mist swordsman and the female Jinchuriki shouted. Naruto grabbed Hinata with his free hand and pulled her close. I owe you a real wedding after this is all over, he said. I'll hold you to that, was Hinata's reply before they kissed. End flashback. After the impromptu ceremony, Naruto concluded, we managed to rout the remaining forces. Oboa and Rama saw that the fighting was futile and gave the order to stand down. A week later, they both formally surrendered, promising not to raise arms against us. With the declaration of surrender, the unification wars were at an end. A couple of days later, Hinata and I had a formal, private ceremony back in Kimen. 2 weeks after that, we were named Emperor and Empress Consort of the West. Tenten, cradling Hazashi, was amazed. That was just, wow, was all she said. Neji nodded. I'll say, he seconded. A wedding in the midst of battle. That must have been something. Troublesome, if you ask me, Shikamaru said. If Tamari finds out, she'll probably demand why I did not propose to her the same way you did to Hinata during the Akatsuki invasion. Murasaki Shibiku immortalized our wedding in her last novel, Hinata said. You probably saw that scene in Koyuki's last film. I thought that looked familiar, Hiyashi said, a fan of the Spring Daimyo's films. Naruto handed Minato to his grandfather. If you excuse us, Hiyashi, he said as he and Hinata stood up. Hiyashi nodded as his son-in-law led his daughter out of the room. Out in the Imperial Villa's gardens, Naruto enjoyed the South Ichiyama night, his wife by his side. It was times like these that he could forget that he was the emperor, or that he was a warrior. He was just Naruto. This is nice. Remember the last time we were here for the first anniversary and Zabuza got drunk and tried to hit on Sana? Naruto asked. The one where Sanshi chased after him with his family swords screaming bloody murder. I remember that. The demon of Kimen being chased by a man twice his age, Hinata replied. Have I ever told you that I'm pregnant? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Once, he replied. Hinata grinned and held up 2 fingers. Better make that twice, love. It then dawned on what Naruto was saying. Hinata was pregnant. Again. That's great, he said, as he picked her up and spun her around in the air before setting her down. Minato will have either a brother or sister. Meanwhile, sneaking into the Imperial Villa was easy enough for Jiraiya. He was, after all, Konoha's resident spymaster. On Tsunade's orders, he was to check around South Ichiyama, and size up the competition from the other villages and the local fighters as well. Aside from the Western fighters, the main threat was one of the 4 devas who has decided to enter the contest, the shogun of the violent lightning himself, Rasu. Hayate Okajima, of which Asuma had a confrontation with earlier that day, was number 2. His recon mission complete, Jiraiya snuck into the Imperial Villa. As Jiraiya had found out, there were no guards, no type of security whatsoever. Even the Imperial complex was crawling with shinobi and samurai guards when Jiraiya and the others had came to Kimen a year earlier. The Imperial Villa had none. Probably because the Gaki doesn't think that anyone would not dare to break into his home, Jiraiya thought as he watched Naruto and Hinata from his hiding place within the gardens. Seriously, what kind of ruler is he not to have any kind of protection? Then again, Jiraiya had forgotten as to who he was dealing with. What Jiraiya did not know was that the Imperial Villa had not only a squad of Imperial guards on site, but also a series of seals which served as a first response alarm to any intruders. Which is where Kurama steps in. Hey, old man. Jiraiya flinched as he felt a woman tap his shoulder. Cursing to himself at being caught, he slowly turned around. And found himself face to face with Kurama, the Biju queen cracking her knuckles, giving the one-armed pervert a fanged grin. Ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? Kurama asked, just as she chambered her arm back in. Pow! Chakra-powered fist met chin, and Jiraiya was launched on an impromptu aerial tour of South Ichiyama. From their spot in the gardens, Naruto and Hinata watched as Kurama emerged from the woods. Naruto had knew that Jiraiya was there, which was why he had sent Kurama out to intercept him. So, Naruto began, where did you knock the old pervert to? Kurama's grin grew as she gave them her answer. The Blue Dragon Resort was a hot springs resort located in the outskirts of the city. The Blue Dragon was originally a brothel before it had become a hot springs resort, its owner a former madam who saw that tourism was more profitable than flesh. Of course that meant that the other brothels had more business coming their way, but that was how business usually went. The Blue Dragon was full to capacity, with visiting dignitaries from throughout the region, as with most of the inns and hotels, the White Destiny being reserved for the visiting cages and their shinobi from the east. Mei Terumi, Kuratsuchi, Benesato Mochizuki, Sana Sanshi, Yugito Ni, and Kasumi Ehara were gathered around Murasaki Shikibu, the West's most beloved writer of poems and romantic stories. Born Fujiwara Takako, she had been born poor in the era before the arrival of Naruto and Hinata. At 15, she had gained the attention of a local warlord for her short stories and had gotten her a job in his court. When she turned 19, she had married his son, a samurai. That was 16 years ago. Now, her husband was a respected official responsible for maintaining order in the Shinoko region, and she was a celebrated writer. The Empress consort was a huge fan of her work, while she had got to meet Spring Daimyo Kazuhana, who adopted some of her works into a couple of her films, thanks to the emperor. Murasaki was well loved and respected by the people in the empire. As Murasaki entertained her company with a story from her childhood, the moment was ruined when a white-haired, one-armed toad sage came screaming from the skies, landing in the waters with a splash, having been forcibly ejected from the imperial villa via Kurama's fist. When Jiraiya managed to crawl out of the water, he felt the killer intent wash over him like a tsunami. Sure, he had been caught peeping before, and was belted with numerous wooden buckets. Instead, he found himself facing one furious Mizukage, an irate blonde Jinchuriki, her battle aura taking on the form of the two tails, two royally pissed granddaughters of the Tsuchikage and the legendary samurai respectively, the latter already having drawn her sword, one less than amused Snake Queen, her snakes coiled around her body, ready to strike in one angry rider. As the angry women closed in, Jiraiya could only whimper in response for the inevitable beatdown that was to come. Inside the imperial villa, Shikamaru stopped in mid-drink and turned his attention elsewhere. Troublesome, he said. What is it? Hanabi asked. I felt a disturbance, the lazy Nara replied. As if a man was screaming for mercy and was silenced. I'd bet my mission salary that the bothersome bastard pissed off a woman, or several. Neji shrugged. Better him than us. Shikamaru chuckled as he raised his cup. I'll drink to that. In another inn somewhere in Ichiyama. The sake cup in which Tsunade was drinking out of broke. Why do I have the strange feeling that Jiraiya had done something stupid again? She thought. Back at the Blue Dragon. The mangled, broken body of Jiraiya was embedded in the rocks. All he could manage to get out was, owie. I hurt. He would be taken to the hospital, and Tsunade would be notified of the incident, as well as being billed for the damages. Ichiyama Coliseum. Ichiyama Coliseum was the largest of the imperial nation's arenas. 3 times as big than the stadium Konoha uses for its Chunin exams and as tall as a 3-story building. It was said that as the first Jinchuriki, the 6 Paths had built the arena out of a small mountain using the power of the 10 tails and reinforced it with seals. To anyone who had seen the stadium for the first time, it was a mesmerizing sight. The interior of the Colosseum was an impressive sight. Surrounded by crystal blue water, the arena itself a massive square platform, held in place by 4 giant statues of the 6 Paths sage via stone chains. The arena was accessible only by bridge, then were retracted. Within the Colosseum's walls, a series of triage centers were located. Hinata's medic corps were on standby to tend to the injuries of the wounded fighters. The Imperial Kumite had 50 fighters, with 20 of them from the east. Before heading out into the stands, they had met with Anko Mitarashi inside a meeting room underneath the stadium, who was explaining the rules of the Imperial Kumite, having herself competed in a couple of them. As Anko explained the rules, she ignored the Konohagakure shinobi, knowing full well of the fate that was in store for them. You all have signed the non-disclosure agreements in which you could not blame the imperial nation for what happens in the tournament. This tournament is single-round elimination. The rules for the Kumite are simple. Full contact, anything goes. Weapons and jutsu are allowed. Any bloodline-related abilities are allowed. The matches are one-on-one, and you can win by knockout, submission, knocking your opponent out of the arena, and my personal favorite, make your opponent say, Mat. Mat, an Iowa shinobi parroted. Saying, Mat, is the same as saying, Uncle, Anko explained. Forcing your opponent to say, Mat, is to the loser, the most humiliating way to lose a match. From his place, Sasuke glared at Rasu, who ignored him as if he was a bug. Good luck, cause you're going to need it, Anko finished. And one more thing. Her face split into a maniacal grin. Try not to die. At the northern end of the stadium, was the booth reserved for the Emperor and Empress Consort, the Imperial Council, and their guests, taking up the top 2 rows of the Colosseum. The upper and lower sections of the massive booth had stairs for easier access. The cages of the East were present, each of them dressed in their robes of state and their respective hats. General Mifune was also present, but had decided not to let several of his men compete. Tsunade Senju was also present, along with Jiraiya, his remaining arm in a sling, broken leg in a cast, a neck brace around his neck and his jaw wired shut, and a representative of the Fire Lord's court and several of his guardian ninja. Guarding the 2 Sannin were Kurenai Yuichi and Yamato. Unknown to Tsunade and Jiraiya, but known to Naruto and Hinata, Kabuto Yakushi was also present, disguised as a member of the Raikage's personal guard. Kabuto was there to keep an eye out on Sasuke, and not to antagonize the Western Empire in any shape, form or fashion. Naruto was standing on the platform along with Hinata, taking in the sights of the crowd, absorbing the cheers of the crowd. From the stands, the Konoha group, Sasuke Uchiha, Asuma Sarutobi, Sakura Haruno and Yugao Azuki, tried to radiate as much as killed intent, but the couple in the arena did not seem to notice. Naruto raised one hand, and the crowd instantly went silent. Using his chakra to amplify his voice, Naruto began to speak. It has been 3 long years since the beginning of a new era for all of us. A new era of peace, order and prosperity. 5 years ago, I was but a warlord with a dream. That dream was to unite this land, to bring about a peace which has not been seen since the time of my great ancestor, the Rakuto Sennin. Through our blood, sweat and tears, we have made that dream into a reality. Through our hard work, through our perseverance, the unified Western Empire has thrived. The audience erupted into cheers. Again, Naruto brought them into silence. Hinata spoke next. We are honored to have with us, the Kages of the East, as well as the representatives of their respective daimyos. We hope that your experience here in the Western Empire is a pleasant one. To the brave men and women who are competing in the Imperial Kumite, my husband, I wish you the best of luck. You 4 are going to need it, Naruto thought darkly as he glared at the Konoha shinobi, his own cage-style hat hiding his face from view. From this moment on, this Colosseum is now your battleground, Hinata concluded. Let the Imperial Kumite begin. The crowd once again erupted into cheers as Naruto and Hinata returned to their booth via Shunshin. Inside the booth, sat the Imperial Council, the 5 Kages and the representatives from the daimyos. Also present was Koyuki Kazuhana, who was there alongside her husband, the Kage of Spring, Koichi Fujimura. Koichi had originally been Koyuki's bodyguard following Cell 7's mission into what was Snow Country, and had stepped down in order to become Kage of the village hidden in the snow. Of course, they both agreed on that their children would have her last name. Naruto and Hinata appeared inside the booth and took their seats. Minato, having been placed in Kurama's care, was handed off to his mother from Kurama. I must say, my boy, Onoki began, you know how to work the crowd here. It comes with practice, Naruto replied. Tsunade ignored the 2 men, having rather ding to take a pull from a sake bottle. Down on the arena, Kentaro Kagami and Zabuza Momochi were having an exhibition match in the form of a sword fight. The Demon of Kimen and the Strongman of the Scorched Earth had a competitive, yet fierce rivalry stemming back from the Unification Wars. The Imperial Council and the 5 Kages watched as the 2 swordsmen dueled to the delight of the crowd. From the sidelines, the Konoha group watched the battle, leaking killer intent. To the 4, who were present in Suna during the Konoha Imperial conflict, the former Mist Swordsman was the one who had killed Hatake. Inside the booth, the 5 Kages and the Imperial Council watched as the fight intensified. Zabuza has improved, May noted. Back in Mist, He was so hot-headed and rash. I think spending time in the West has done him some good. Don't worry, Naruto replied. He's still the sociopath you come to know and respect. In fact, the only one who can match him is Anko. Come to think of it, I think that Zabuza is quite the masochist. On the other side, sat the Godime Kazekage of Suna, Gaara. I believe congratulations are in order, he said. Matsuri has told me the news. Hinata is pregnant again. I should be congratulating you as well, as it appears that your wife is also expecting, Naruto replied. Out on the arena, the battle ended in a standoff, Zabuza and Kintaro's respective blades resting against the other's throats. The crowd erupted in cheers as both men took several steps back and bowed to one another before vanishing via shunshin. So how long is the Imperial Kumite? Mei asked. It continues until a champion is crowned, Naruto said. A was the previous year's champion. Zabuza was the previous year's champion. And you or Hinata don't compete? Katsuragi asked. No, we do want to keep it fair, Hinata replied. My husband and I don't compete in the tournament. Neither do the visiting leaders of the villages. The Imperial Kumite is designed to promote healthy competition and goodwill within the empire. Whoever wins the Imperial Kumite is named champion, but cannot compete in the next year's Kumite. They have to wait until the year is up before competing again. As Hinata and Naruto explained how the Kumite worked, Jiraiya and Tsunade settled back in their seats, thinking that the Leaf had the tournament in the bag. Given that they had the last Uchiha, a former guardian ninja, the vice commander of the Anbu Black Ops unit, and the feral Inuzuka, they were complacent in their superiority. Just you wait, Gaki, Tsunade thought darkly. Konoha will come out on top in the Imperial Kumite. And watching you admit that Konoha is the strongest village in the east will be so sweet. As the tournament progressed, Konoha had advanced through the first round, but it had not been easy. Asuma Sarutobi had eliminated a fighter from Iwa. Sasuke Uchiha had defeated a low-ranking Imperial samurai. Sakura Haruno used her chakra-enhanced super strength to knock an Imperial ninja out of the ring. Yugao Azuki managed to eke out a win by using the dance of the crescent moon on a mist shinobi. As Tsunade and the others watched, Kuretsuchi of Iwa, two of Mei's mist shinobi and Tamari of Suna had also advanced through the tournament. On the Empire's side, were Ino Yamanaka, Hellcat members and Miko Himura and Tenten Hyuga. Rasu of the Violent Lightning also made it through the tournament, as did Hayate Okajima. His only intention for fighting was to pound Asuma Sarutobi into the ground. Rock Lee was defeated by Neji, who in turn was beaten by Rasu. Sasuke had succeeded in knocking Mist out of the competition, much to Mei's dismay. So ended day 1 of the Imperial Kumite. At one of South Ichiyama's training grounds, Sasuke Uchiha was going through a kata with his Chikudo. He was alone, as the others from Konoha were back at their hotel. Tsunade and Jiraiya had went to a bar to drink and plan for the next day. There was no plan, Sasuke had deduced. He was in the Dobi's backyard, and by winning the Imperial Kumite, he would give his former teammate a serious black eye. That would be the first. He would prove to the Empire that the Uchiha was superior. Then he would pay the Dobi back for killing Itachi. And Hinata. Sasuke thought darkly. She knows how to carry herself in battle. She's even stronger than that weakling Haruno. I will break her in front of the Dobi. He is not worthy of being the ruler of these people. I will take his throne, and the Empire will bear the rebirth of the Uchiha. Trouble sleeping, Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke spun around, Chikudo ready to impale the offending person dumb enough to intrude on his training. Kabuto, still dressed as one of Katsuragi's bodyguards, emerged from the shadows, unmasked, allowing Sasuke to see his face. Then again, if I found out that my former teammate was the ruler of an empire, I would have trouble sleeping as well, he said. So you know about that? Sasuke sniped as he went back to his training. I did not know until after the Akatsuki invaded Suna, Kabuto explained. I was there on Lord Orochimaru's orders when the Akatsuki came. But he has known about the empire for quite some time. I was also there when the Akatsuki invaded, and fought under the guise of Asuna Junin. If the dead last and a insecure heiress could not only do that much damage to the leaf, then the leaf is severely lacking in training. Quote. Sasuke remained silent. It goes to show that sometimes, the dead last can surprise you, Kabuto continued, noticing how Sasuke's grip on the Chikudo was getting even tighter. Look at Jiraiya. He was the dead last on his team. Now, he is 1/3 of the legendary Sannin, although now he is missing an arm, but still. Sasuke turned around. What do you want, Kabuto? He asked icily. Nothing. Just stopped by for a friendly chat, and to check up on your progress, Kabuto continued. Ironic, don't you think? The dead last stopped you the last time you tried to come to our side, and what did that get him? A one-way ticket out of Konoha. Now look at him, Emperor of the Western Empire. While you, on the other hand, despite being trained by the late copycat, Hatake and the Warhawk, well, to put it politely, you are stagnating in Konoha, despite wielding the Magankyu. As much as you don't want to hear this, Uchiha, Naruto is stronger than you. In response, Sasuke tried to cleave Kabuto in two, but found himself splitting a log in two instead. Did I touch a nerve, Sasuke? Kabuto's voice rang out from the trees. You can do much more. You can learn more under the best of the legendary Sannin. You can learn how to better control your seal. Lord Orochimaru's offer is still open to you, Sasuke Uchiha. With that, he was gone, leaving Sasuke alone with his thoughts. Kabuto did have a point. In the 7 years following Uzumaki's banishment, he was pardoned for his attempted defection, but it came with a price. Sasuke, and all of Konoha, had underestimated the influence that the dead last turned emperor had on the people he had met. In the 7 years following the Dobi's banishment, he had been out of Fire Country only twice. Both times, he and Cell 7 had been attacked by rival shinobi. He had been placed under what he saw was virtual house arrest as a result. Kabuto was right about another thing. Konoha had gotten weak in the years following Uzumaki's banishment. Add the fact that 4 of its clans had defected to the west and Suna had now taken Konoha's spot as the strongest of the village, Sasuke's opinion of the leaf had plummeted even further. And Uchiha values strength above all things, his father had told him. The strong leads, while the weak follows. That is the Uchiha way. Sasuke's patience in regards to Konoha was running thin. Orochimaru's offer was looking more attractive than ever. Day 2 of the Imperial Kumite. The tournament continued with the semifinals. Asuma Sarutobi had knocked off another Iwa shinobi, leaving Kuretsuchi. Sasuke Uchiha had trouble with his latest opponent, but had powered on through with a Chidori to the chest. Thankfully, his opponent had survived the assassination jutsu. Then came Ino. Her opponent was Sakura Haruno, in a rematch from their Chunin exams back when Naruto and Hinata were both genin. Both women were medic nins, and both were trained under Sannin. While Sakura remained in Konoha, unable to travel, as the impromptu death sentence extended to her as well, given that she was also a member of Cell 7, Ino had far exceeded Hinata's expectations as a medic nin. Combine that with Okajima's training, and Ino had made a name for herself as a highly skilled kunoichi. Ino didn't even need to use her mind transfer jutsu. She simply manipulated Sakura around the arena, and sidestepped her former friend. Sakura fell face first into the water, and Ino had won the match by ring out. Then came Asuma Sarutobi, who had the bad luck of being pitted against the Ino Shikacho's new sensei, Hayate Okajima. Asuma Sachiro Bi of Konohagakure no Sato vs Hayate Okajima of Shinzoku. Fighters, to the arena. Hayate Okajima and Asuma Sarutobi entered the arena. Okajima was clad in his shinobi uniform, think Hanzo Hattori's costume from Samurai Shodown Sen, but without the red scarf and face mask, and was in the process of securing his Tengu mask on his face. From the booth, Tsunade had a grin on her face as she watched Asuma enter the arena. Looks like my luck is turning, brat, she addressed Naruto. Asuma is fighting. So is Okajima, Naruto noted. Hayate Okajima is not only a member of my council and minister of shinobi affairs, but he is also a cunning and ruthless strategist. His intellect is rivaled by the Nara. He is also a master of the silent kill. Only the Chiba and the Hyuga could match him in taijutsu. There is a difference between playing bodyguard to a daimyo and fighting in a war, senju. The son of the Sandaime is in for one tough fight. Why the Tengu mask? Mei asked. I asked Okajima the same thing, Naruto said. He just told me that he just liked wearing it. I just left it at that. On the arena floor, Okajima cracked his neck muscles, and stood there, sizing up the former sensei of the Ino Shika Cho trio. Asuma pulled out his trench knives and channeled chakra into them. He saw that Okajima did not have a ninjutsu on him, and soon discovered why. On his forearms and hands were clawed gauntlets, the fingers ending in sharpened claws. He could have taken the easy way out and asked the Ino Shika Cho as to how Asuma fought, but decided against that idea. Asuma gripped his knives even tighter. Even without being able to properly pull off jutsu, Asuma was still a battle-hardened warrior under the Godaime's command. Fighters, ready, and go. Asuma did not waste any time, lunging forward with a front snap kick, of which Hayate swatted to the side. The spinning back kick was also knocked aside. The former guardian ninja and the Tengu moved in, Asuma punching and slashing with his trench knives, kicking up sparks as he attempted to use the flying swallow to break through Okajima's defenses, kicking up sparks as his trench knives made contact against Okajima's chakra-covered gauntlets. Asuma took a step back in order to avoid the punch to the face, but Okajima did not let up. The Tengu scored the first blow, an open palm strike to the face, which left an angry red mark on Asuma. From the booth, the Ino Shika Cho watched the fight. They knew that Asuma was good, but their de facto sensei was even better. It was Shikamaru who explained Okajima's motives. Okajima sensei is feeling Asuma out, he explained to Ino and Choji, who was eating a bag of chips. Once he's done that, then he will go in for the kill. Kurenai had heard Shikamaru's comment and grew worried. Asuma could not pull off any jutsu which involved hand seals, as he was still going through rehab over that. After all, Shikamaru continued, he did the same to us when he took us under his wing. Don't remind me, Ino said, shuddering. We learned more under Okajima sensei than Asuma. Down in the arena, Asuma had succeeded in tagging Okajima with several powerful blows, but Okajima had been hit with a whole lot worse. He ignored the pain and the fight began to turn in his favor. What made the fight even more exciting was that Okajima, a master of ninjutsu, was not using any jutsu for the match. He simply relied on taijutsu to beat Asuma within an inch of his life. 2 kicks to the sternum forced Asuma up against the stone chains. There, Hayate proceeded to pummel him with a barrage of punches, elbows and kicks. Asuma tried to defend against the onslaught, but it was no use. After 20 seconds of non-stop pummeling, Okajima stopped, and Asuma, bloodied and bruised, slumped to a seated position, blood seeping from his mouth and from a cut to the head. This match was over. Hayate turned to the proctor. Call the match, he said. The winner, Hayate Okajima. The crowd cheered as Okajima made his exit via Shunshin and reappeared in the booth. Ignoring the angry looks of Kurenai and the others, Okajima took his seat and removed his gauntlets from his hands. The gauntlets stained with Asuma's blood. Your man is still alive, Okajima said, not looking in Tsunade's direction as he addressed her and Kurenai. The infirmary is at the south end of the stadium, first underground level. You're more than happy to check on him there. Kurenai looked at Tsunade, who gave her consent with a nod. With a glare to both Okajima and Naruto, Kurenai disappeared in a shunshin. From his seat, Naruto chuckled. Yamato leveled his own spooky glare, which had scared Naruto in his youth, but Naruto responded with his own 1,000-yard stare, causing Yamato to flinch, and back down as a result. The next match was Yugao Azuki against Hellcat member Miko Himura. Having seen Yugao use the dance of the crescent moon, Miko knew what to expect. She countered the move by dispelling the clones used for the jutsu and disarmed Yugito. The vice commander of the Anbu had no other choice but to concede defeat. With Yugao out of the tournament, Sasuke Uchiha remained. The Uchiha prince managed to knock Kuretsuchi out of the ring. Temari won against Ino, but lost to Rasu, thus putting both Suna and Iwa out of the tournament. That left the Uchiha and two Imperial warriors ready to tear him limb from limb. Even Tsunade knew that Sasuke's chances of getting out of this tournament in one piece were nil. The Emperor held all the cards and it pissed Tsunade off to no end. Miko Himura, seeing that Rasu wanted to fight Sasuke, had forfeited her place in the tournament, citing chakra exhaustion. Naruto had made sure that she would be reimbursed for time served in the tournament. Which led to this moment. Final round. Sasuke Uchiha of Konohagakure no Sato vs Rasu of the Violent Lightning. Fighters, to the arena. Sasuke used a shunshin to teleport to the ring, while Rasu strode in. The red and gold armor glistened in the afternoon sun as the shogun of the Violent Lightning faced down his last opponent. Rasu remembered his emperor's orders for him when the time came for him to face the arrogant Uchiha. Crush him. If he made Sasuke say, "Mat," then it would be a bonus. The Uchiha smirked as he watched his opponent. Your road ends here, Rasu. Here is where I will prove to the Dobi and his whore that I am better than him by beating you. Then he will be next, and the West will see that I am the elite of the elites. Rasu simply responded by cracking his knuckles, before switching hands and repeating the motion. Then you have no problem in showing me that you are an elite Uchiha. Please be a suitable challenge for me, unlike your late brother, whom the emperor had killed. Sasuke unsheathed his chikudo, just as the proctor shouted, "Fighters! Ready! And go!" Lightning danced around Rasu as he assumed his stance. Let the thunder roll, he mused. Sasuke started the match by flinging several kunai at Rasu, who merely batted them out of the way. But Sasuke hoped that it would distract him long enough for him to move in and use his sword. But Rasu was faster and unsealed his own weapon, a metal staff. Aside from his lightning release, Rasu was a prodigy in Bojutsu, of which Sasuke would soon find out. The crowd roared its approval as Chikudo and bow clashed. Rasu calmly parried Sasuke's thrusts and swings. From his place inside the booth, Kabuto nodded in approval. Sasuke has improved. But Rasu is playing with him. He looked at the emperor from the corner of his eye. Naruto does not look like he is worried. Could this be a setup to humiliate the Uchiha? I wonder. In the arena, Rasu moved to the side in order to avoid Sasuke's sword thrust. His fist bounced off the back of the Uchiha's skull, knocking him to the ground. I got to say that this is the most fun I had in a while. It's good to compete in such tournaments, as it keeps you sharp, said the Lightning Master. Sasuke got back to his feet and retrieved his chikudo. Glaring at the smug Rasu, who was balancing his staff on one shoulder, he charged and the fight resumed. Sasuke then felt the air rush out of his lungs as Rasu slammed his fist into his torso, forcing him down to one knee. You know what your greatest sin is, Uchiha? Rasu asked. Your pride. For all your talk and proclaiming your greatness, you are merely hiding behind your Sharingan and your name, living in the shadow of your older brother. Shut up, Sasuke shouted back. You know nothing. Oh, but I do, Rasu replied as he and Sasuke locked weapons. I know about you and the chief being on the same cell when the both of you were younger. That Hitaki had given you every single jutsu that you could ask for. The chief and the lady were very honest about their past. The chief has his flaws, as does his wife, but he got to where he is at because of hard work. Unlike you, the chief does not proclaim his superiority just because he is a descendant of the Six Paths. He did not use his ancestry to get to where he is. He did not use his Rinnegan as a crutch. For that reason, does he earn my respect. You compare me to that Dobi. Sasuke seethed. I am an Uchiha. I am also a descendant of the Six Paths. I do, Rasu replied. And sorry to bust your bubble, but neither the Uchiha nor the Senju are not the direct descendants of the Six-Path Sage, the very first Jinchuriki of whose power was this stadium was built. Your clan ancestor and those of the Senju merely were trained by him, and rode on his coattails to make their family line even more illustrious. You think you had it bad given that your nutjob of a brother exterminated your clan? Try growing up without parents. The chief came out just fine. You are seriously in the head. Shut up, Sasuke shouted, breaking the hold. But before he could counterattack, Rasu thrust his staff forward, catching Sasuke in his shoulder. Sasuke's screams echoed through the Colosseum as a shock of electricity coursed through his veins, giving the audience a nice view of what his skeleton looked like. Oh, suck it up, Uchiha, Rasu sniped as Sasuke dropped his Chikudo. I barely touched you. He turned to the proctor. Call the match. This run has no more fight left in him. Sasuke's eyes shifted into the Magankyu as she spun upon Rasu. No, this fight is not over yet. He screamed as he went through several hand seals. Chidori. Rasu smirked as Sasuke used the power of the cursed seal to give him an extra boost in speed. How in the world can an assassination jutsu can create such a racket, he thought as Sasuke bared down on him. Rasu's hand balled into a fist as he produced the counter for such an inferior technique. Rasengan. The lightning fist was Rasu's signature technique. It was delivered in one of two ways: a straight punch to the face, or a rising uppercut a la Kazuya Mishima's electric wind god fist. As Sasuke found out, he was struck with the latter. The blow had knocked him 7 feet into the air, with Rasu soon following after him, adding insult to injury by using the lion combo, of which Sasuke had stolen from Rock Lee during the Chunin exams, his foot slamming the Uchiha into the stone arena. The Rasengan had made Sasuke's chakra control and his nervous go haywire, which was more than enough time for Rasu to put the final nail in the coffin. A kick to the torso, followed by Rasu rolling Sasuke over on his stomach, pinning him to the arena with one knee and Sasuke's arm painfully wrenched behind his back. I want to hear it. Rasu shouted. Say it. Sasuke knew what Rasu wanted him to say. But Sasuke was not going to say it. To say that 5-letter word would be the ultimate humiliation even for him. When Sasuke hesitated in his answer, Rasu responded by applying even more pressure onto his arm, threatening to break it should Sasuke not give in. Say it, Uchiha, Rasu demanded. Say it so that everyone can hear. Faced with leaving the Empire with a broken arm, Sasuke conceded defeat. Mat. Satisfied, Rasu released Sasuke's arm and moved away from him as the crowd cheered. The winner, and champion of the Imperial Kumite, Rasu. The announcer declared. Inside the booth, Naruto grinned, while Tsunade was slamming her fist on the reinforced arm of her chair, swearing up a storm while Jiraiya and Yamato looked pissed. The Ino Shika-cho cheered for the newest champion. Katsuragi, Gaara, Onoki, and Mei had looks of satisfaction on their faces as to how the tournament had played out. In the arena, Sasuke's eyes morphed into the Magankyu as he scrambled over to his Chikudo, his intention clear. He was going to rob the Empire of its champion. Sasuke activated the Chidori-Katana and charged, intending on impaling Rasu from behind. Rasu simply responded by performing a lightning shunshin, and Sasuke passed where Rasu once stood moments earlier. Sasuke had to skid to a stop, as he found himself close to the arena's edge. Upon reappearing, Rasu took the opportunity to give his dishonorable opponent a final indignity. He booted Sasuke off the arena and into the water. It had gotten a real good laugh from the crowd. And that laughter increased as Sasuke dragged himself out of the water and stomped out of the arena, humiliated beyond belief. In the booth, Tsunade was torn between knocking Sasuke's head off for his attempted cheap shot from behind, while at the same time wanting to die following the humiliation that Sasuke, and by extension, Konoha, had suffered through his actions. Konohagakure no Sato, 3 weeks later. Sasuke Uchiha was not very happy. His grand debut in the Empire's Imperial Kumite had been a big failure. The team that Tsunade had assembled was a big failure. He had not only lost, but had been thoroughly humiliated by Rasu, and by extension, Naruto. Even worse, Konoha and Fire Country had to pay a huge indemnity due to Sasuke's attempted murder of Rasu or face invasion from the Western Empire. Word had spread fast about how Sasuke not only lost, but as to how he had tried to spear the champion of this year's Imperial Kumite in the back with his Chidori katana. One thing that Sasuke absolutely hated aside from Naruto was the fact that he was looked down upon as a joke, as an afterthought. Upon returning to Konoha, he had kept to himself, unless summoned by Danzo. His opinion on Tsunade and her super pervert of a teammate had sank even lower. The idea of leaving Konoha for greener pastures, namely, Otogakure, was more frequent in his mind. He had closed himself off from the others, save for Danzo, as he answered to him. He was to be seen as a hero, as one who had beaten the best that the Empire had to offer. But that backfired in the most extreme way. Still thinking evil thoughts as he entered the Uchiha district, he entered his home. The two black books were placed on his nightstand inside his bedroom. They were out of place, as Sasuke did not own books with black binders on them. Further inspection showed that the books in question were Black Ops books detailing every single Black Ops mission that had taken place in Konohagakure under the Hokages and Danzo Shimura. Curiosity getting the better of him, Sasuke sat down on the edge of the bed and began to read. And Sasuke's anger grew as he discovered the truth behind the Uchiha incident, of how it was ordered by the Sandaime himself, with the backing of Danzo Shimura and the two deceased council elders in order to thwart his father's attempts at a coup. Of how the Konoha Civilian Council had planned on turning the Sharingan into a weapon in order to make Konoha the strongest of the villages. Last, he read about Danzo and his hidden arm containing the Shadaime's Mokuten and the harvested Sharingans, not to Shisui's Sharingan hidden behind those bandages, as well as his now failed plans in regards to Naruto and his new plans in making Sasuke the perfect weapon, while at the same time, subjugating him to serve Konoha's will. Even worse, was that Tsunade herself signed off on the order in the Black Ops book for the Hokage. If Sasuke was made before, he was outright furious. His life was not his own. His bloodline had been stolen by those who did not deserve it. He had been played by the Hokage and the Civilian Council. The path to him was now clear. Sasuke Uchiha had left the village shortly before dawn, but not before sending Konoha a message. First, he had spent most of the night sneaking into the homes of the Civilian Council and executed the council members. Sakura's mother, the head of the Konoha Merchants Guild, was among the casualties. As Sakura was working at the hospital at the time, she was spared his wrath. Sasuke thought about killing Danzo and Tsunade, but decided against it. But he did, however, killed Asuma Sarutobi as he was on his way home from his rehab, ambushing him and leaving his body inside one of Konoha's alleys, thus making Kurenai a widow. By the time the alarm was raised, Sasuke Uchiha was halfway to Otogakure. Furious, Tsunade and Danzo had ordered a joint retrieval mission to bring the Uchiha back. However, Orochimaru had anticipated this and had reacted. He unleashed the revived Sound 4 and 200 Oto Junin upon the 20-man retrieval team. Only 3 members of the retrieval team sent by Tsunade, Kiba Inuzuka, and route operatives Torun Aburame and Fuyamanaka, survived to return with the bad news. The Uchiha retrieval mission too was a complete failure. Sasuke Uchiha had successfully defected to Orochimaru. The Fire Daimyo's response was instant. Sasuke Uchiha was declared a S-class missing nin and traitor to both the Leaf and Fire Country, wanted for the murders of Asuma Sarutobi and the civilian members of the Konohagakure Civilian Council. Otogakure, Rice Country. Welcome to my humble home, Sasuke Uchiha, Orochimaru greeted from his throne as Sasuke entered the room, having been led inside by Kabuto. I am pleased to see that you have taken up my offer. He turned to Kabuto. What of the retrieval team sent by the Leaf? With the exception of 3, all are dead, Kabuto replied. Good. Very good, the snake Sanin said. You have made the right choice in coming here to Otogakure, Sasuke. I have heard about your performance in the Imperial Kumite, as well as the incident in Suna regarding your former teammate. Although I am rather surprised to find out that the dead last is now the Emperor. I can care less about the Dobi, Sasuke snapped. I want only one thing, aside from the power that you promised me. Oh, and that is, burn Konoha to the ground, Sasuke replied. Destroy everything, Tsunade, Danzo. Everything. Konoha has betrayed my clan and tried to make me into their personal weapon. Naruto and the Empire can wait. I know the Leaf's strengths and weaknesses. With the loss of 4 of their clans and most of their experienced Junin, Konoha is weak. I cannot serve a village that is weak. Yes. Orochimaru leaned back in his seat. I believe we will get along just fine, Sasuke. Just fine. Imperial Complex, Kimen, several days later. The scroll from the Empire's intelligence division was delivered to Naruto in Hinata's office inside the House of Sovereigns by a member of said division. The scroll was a week old, but it contained something that Naruto wanted to hear ever since returning to Konoha to plant the incriminating evidence of the 2 Black Ops books he had stolen months earlier inside of Sasuke's home. Naruto read the scroll, with Hinata reading over his shoulder. Sasuke Uchiha defected from the Leaf. Fire Daimyo has placed Uchiha in the bingo book as a S-class missing ninja, and for the murders of the Konohagakure Civilian Council and Asuma Sarutobi. I have to say that I am very impressed, Hinata acknowledged. One thing about the Uchiha, her husband replied. He is so predictable. Although killing off the Civilian Council and Asuma was something that I was not expecting, it's still a nice bonus. So what do we do now? Hinata asked. We wait. Konoha's days are numbered, Naruto replied. The Leaf has sown the wind. Now, it will reap the whirlwind. And when the time comes for the Leaf to fall, I will be there to put the nail in their coffin. 9 months had passed since the conclusion of the Imperial Kumite in South Ichiyama. Since then, the Imperial Nation had signed a non-aggression pact with both Iwagakure and Earth Country, as well as establishing a Pakera outpost in the Earth capital. Onoki also agreed to have Iwa medic nins come to Kimen to learn under Hinata in order to keep Iwa casualties down. Second, Naruto had reclaimed the ruins of Whirlpool Country and annexed it. He did not revive Uzushiogakure no Sato, as there was no need. He did, however, made Whirlpool into a major Pakera outpost. In the months following the conclusion of the Imperial Kumite, Sasuke Uchiha had defected from Konoha and had murdered Asuma Sarutobi and the Konoha Civilian Council on his way out. The incident would become known as the Uchiha Slaughter. Given the fact that he had ran years earlier, and that he wielded the Magankyu Sharingan, he was labeled as an S-class threat in the bingo book. Orders. Kill on sight. Naruto knew that he had fled to Otogakure, as he was the one who manipulated the Uchiha to head there in the first place. Now, it was only a matter of time before Orochimaru and Sasuke would invade Konoha. Orochimaru had not only been training Sasuke in learning how to control his cursed seal, but also had recruited bandits and missing nin to the sound, swelling his ranks, the majority of which having been subjected to the cursed seal. As expected, Orochimaru had ordered his nin not to antagonize the Pakera merchants and their caravans, as he did not want the empire on his back. Sasuke balked at the order, but honored it, as Orochimaru did have a point. Kabuto had seen firsthand the imperial forces in action, as the Akatsuki found out the hard way. We will make our move against the empire and their interests soon enough, Orochimaru had told Sasuke. But right now, our main focus is the Leaf. It did not occur to Orochimaru that Naruto was manipulating him into attacking Konoha. Kabuto had his suspicions, but dismissed them, as he assumed that Naruto could not plan such a grandiose scheme. It did not occur to Sasuke that Naruto had manipulated him into defecting from Konoha by making him look worthless in the eyes of the shinobi world, nor that the blackout books from Danzo and the Hokage were planted by him. He had failed to take his late sensei's words to heart, look underneath the hidden meanings. It did not occur to Tsunade and Jiraiya that they had severely underestimated their ex-godson. They thought he had the devil's luck in avoiding their hunter nins and establishing the empire, that he was like Jiraiya when the Sannin were under Sarutobi's tutelage, a dead last. They did not expect to be manipulated by Naruto, or that he would use Orochimaru and Sasuke to bring about Konoha's destruction with Naruto himself delivering the coup de grace. 9 months later, Hinata had given birth to their second child. The couple named her Mocha Kushina Namikaze. As the imperial nation celebrated the birth of their new princess, Orochimaru had decided that the time was right for them to attack Konohagakure. Captain Asahina had sent a communique to the imperial capital, notifying Naruto and Hinata of the invasion of Konoha. Even though he did not want to leave his newborn daughter, Naruto had to make sure that Konoha and by extension, Oto, could not threaten his family or the empire. Hinata had understood and told him to do what he must, and that he had better come back alive. Taking Kurama with him, Naruto used the Demon's Gate and the pair found themselves in Fire Country. Naruto had summoned the 6 paths and placed them under henges and had them join up with Orochimaru's army, while both he and Kurama set up in Konoha from their place on top of the ruined Hokage monument, after retrieving the ashes of Hashirama and Tobarama Senju from the Konoha cemetery. From their place on the monument, Naruto and Kurama watched as Tsunade had ordered the village to be evacuated of all civilians, followed by Konoha shinobi trying to strengthen their defenses. Several messenger birds had been dispatched to Suna and Mist, but Naruto knew that Gaara and Mei would not get involved. This would be Konoha's final war. One of two things was going to happen: that Konoha would somehow survive, but would be irreversibly crippled, or Konoha would be destroyed. Naruto was going to make sure that the latter would be the desired result. He had once told Hinata that when the time came, he would be watching Konoha's downfall on the top of the Hokage monument with some drinks, a couple of sushi plates, and some popcorn. Much to Kurama's amusement, he did just that. The invasion had begun in earnest shortly after noon. Sasuke and Orochimaru led the assault, backed by over 2,000 Oto shinobi. While Sasuke went after Danzo, with 2 of Naruto's 6 paths, following him deep into the underground complex, where Danzo was located. Through control of the 2 paths accompanying Sasuke, he had seen the events which had led to Danzo's final fight with Sasuke, while Orochimaru and his forces carved a path to the ruins of the Hokage Tower, where Tsunade, Jiraiya and the remaining members of the Konoha 11 and their families awaited to make their last stand. Orochimaru, being the sadistic bastard he was, had not only subjected half of his forces to the cursed seal, but also had used the impure world resurrection jutsu, bringing back once again Hashirama and Tobarama Senju, but also Hiruzen Sarutobi, Kakashi Hatake, Itachi Uchiha, who had accompanied Sasuke to kill Danzo, Asuma Sarutobi and the Konohamaru Corps to help in bring about Konoha's destruction. Helpless under Orochimaru's control, the resurrected shinobi put their former village to the sword. Asuma Sarutobi had murdered his wife. The Konohamaru Corps had slaughtered a quarter of the Chunin that had came up with them in their days at the Shinobi Academy, forcing the surviving Chunin to lead the Konohamaru Corps into a trap, consisting of rigging the former Hyuga compound with explosive tags, destroying the compound and crushing the revived trio under the debris. Meanwhile, Tsunade, Jiraiya and the remaining clan heads and their children were fighting Orochimaru, the 2 Senju brothers and Hiruzen Sarutobi, while Kakashi slaughtered the majority of the Anbu Black Ops by using Amaterasu, Yamato and Yugao being among the casualties, but not before Yamato used his Mokuden to crush the Sound 4. The Konoha hospital was not exempt from Orochimaru's wrath. A squad of Oto Nin, their bodies covered with exploding tags and under the influence of the cursed seals, leveled the building in a suicide attack. Among the casualties were Shizune Kato and Maeda Gai, who had been in the hospital since Suna. Despite this, Tsunade and Konoha had fought on, until the battle had began to inch to a stalemate. Tsume and Kiba Inuzuka were both killed by the Sandaime and his son. Hana Inuzuka, on her mother's orders, had evacuated with the civilians. Shino and Shibi Aburame had met their end at the hands of the revived Shidaime and Nadaime Hokages. Sasuke had joined in the fray, and had cut down the remaining Anbu who were there to protect Tsunade. Naruto, having seen enough, finally decided to intervene. Clap, 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 clap. The fighting between Konoha and Oto Shinobi stopped as they heard the sound of clapping. The three Sannin stopped their 2-on-1 brawl, as did the revived Hiruzen and Asuma Sarutobi, Kakashi Hatake, and the Senju brothers. The warring parties looked around, trying to find out who was clapping, until the person in question revealed himself. He stepped out of the smoke, accompanied by a red-headed woman. He was the one who was clapping, applauding at the mayhem that was unfolding, dressed in his shinobi uniform, the same one which Tsunade and Jiraiya had seen him wear in Suna. Kurama accompanied him, dressed in her battle uniform. Life's end. Isn't it beautiful? It's almost tragic. When life ends, it gives off a final lingering aroma. Light is but a farewell gift from the darkness to those on their way to die, the emperor stated. Hiruzen blinked. Minato. I'm not my father, old man, Naruto sniped. Oh yes, I know that the yellow flash was my father. You lied to me, Sarutobi. You lied to me ever since I was a child. Naruto. I did what I did to protect you, Sarutobi attempted to defend his actions. Your father had many enemies from the last shinobi war. Please understand. I understand that you and Danzo tried to turn me into a loyal weapon, Naruto replied. I understand that you betrayed my parents. Oh, yes, I understand that manipulating a boy was more important than honoring my parents' final wishes. Hiruzen sighed, dropping the facade. I suppose I can drop the act, then. Yeah, you should, Naruto replied. He turned to Tsunade and Jiraiya. Remember what I told the both of you that day when you decided to banish me? Do you? Of course Tsunade and Jiraiya had remembered. They did not take it in account that he was serious. After all, they had written him off as the dead last, the Kyuubi brat who had robbed them of their loved ones. They had laughed off his threat. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. You and all of Konohagakure decided to back a traitor over me. I will not forget this, and I sure as hell will not forgive the both of you for this betrayal. Pray that I don't come back to this godforsaken village, because when I do, I will destroy you all. Never let it be known that I keep my word, the emperor said. I told the both of you in Suna that this was just the beginning. As my father brought about Konoha's rise, so I will bring about its fall. You, bringing about the leaf's destruction. Ha, Sakura snorted. You were so full of yourself, Naruto. Even back when we were kids. People change when you don't see or hear from them for years, Haruno, Naruto sniped. Even me. He looked at the faces of the Sannin and those of his former cell in the Sandame. This is quite the reunion. It's been years since we've been here, together in the leaf. He turned to Kurama, and here, I thought they would be happy to see us, Kurama. Kurama gave Naruto a fanged grin. But, Naruto continued, as Tsunade and the others could make out the forms of a man and a woman in the smoke from behind the emperor and the Biju queen. I did not come alone. He turned to Jiraiya. You told me in Suna that you honored my parents' sacrifice by allowing me to suffer, rather than respect their final wishes. Perhaps you would like to convey what you told me to them yourself. With that, the two people emerged from the smoke. To anyone from Konoha, they recognized the pair almost instantly, even after being dead for over 20 years. The man had blonde hair styled in the same manner as his son. He was dressed in the standard Konoha Junin uniform, complete with flak vest. The white trenchcoat with the flame pattern on the tail end fluttered in the breeze. On one finger, through the ring, he was twirling a Hiraishin Trikunai. His companion had long red hair, which she kept tied in a ponytail. Rather than the Konoha Junin uniform, she was dressed in the standard uniform of the Whirlpool Kunoichi, which was similar as to what Hinata herself would wear. A ninjutsu was in her left hand. The Yellow Flash, himself, Yondaime Hokage Minato Namikaze, and his wife, the Princess of Whirlpool, the Red Death herself, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. And the pair did not look very happy upon seeing the people who had betrayed and later, attempted to kill their son. People who they at one time trusted with their lives. Naruto smirked. Orochimaru isn't the only one who knows the impure world resurrection. In truth, Naruto did not know the forbidden jutsu. He had simply placed two reinforced clones under the henge to make them look like Minato and Kushina to use as a form of psychological warfare. However, through a twist of fate, the Shinigami allowed Minato and Kushina's souls to possess the two shadow clones for the duration of the clones' existence. Even the death god agreed that Konoha had to answer for their betrayal, and had allowed them to return to the land of the living, if only for a short time. This, Naruto had done before leaving Kimen for Konoha. Of course, it did give Minato and Kushina some time with their grandchildren before they left, as well as thanking their friends, the Ino Shikacho and Hiashi, for honoring their final request in regards to Naruto. While Naruto was on the Hokage monument, Minato and Kushina decided to vent out their frustrations by taking the fight to Konoha's forces until the time came for the big reveal. Give me one good reason as to why I should not do to this village what I had done to Aiwa, Minato said, gripping the Trikunai in one hand. One reason. We did what we had to do, Jiraiya defended. Hiruzen-sensei saw that Konoha was crippled following the last shinobi war, so we had to ensure that the Nine Tails remained in Konoha to ensure our survival. When it became clear that Naruto could not be controlled, we saw him as a threat, and had to be dealt with as such. Kushina, on the other hand, was livid. So not only you tried to exterminate my brother and my clan, but you damned my son to a living hell. She demanded. She was not known as the red-hot habanero for nothing. She wanted to gut Jiraiya for what he had done. The Nine Tails were the property of the Senju clan, and by extension, the Leaf, defended Tsunade. Just as all of the other Biju were. Kushina looked at her aunt with a mixture of pity and betrayal. You're wrong. I'm sure that my son has already explained to you that the Biju are not the property of the Senju clan, but rather under the care of the Uzumaki clan, of which our ancestor was the Rakudo Sennin himself. That much is true, Hashirama said. All I did was use the Mokuden to subdue them. He looked at the reunited family. Who are you? My name, Lord Shadaime, is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, Naruto began. Former Genin shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato, former Jinchuriki of Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, descendant of the Rakudo Sennin, and emperor of the unified Western Empire. Tsunade Senju, as much as I hate to admit, is my great-aunt, since Mito Uzumaki was her grandmother. He introduced his parents. My father, Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, Minato Namikaze, and my mother, the Princess of Whirlpool and second Jinchuriki to Kurama, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. What the kid speaks is the truth, Kurama confirmed. To back up Naruto's claim, 9 fox tails emerged from her backside. The Biju queen smirked as she savored the looks of disbelief on the faces of the Sannin and on the resurrected cages. Even Orochimaru looked shocked. In case you're a bit slow, I am Kurama, better known by my title, Kyuubi no Yoko, the nine-tailed fox. She looked at Hashirama. You don't look so good, Hashirama. Mito would disapprove. Jiraiya was shocked. The hot redhead that had been hanging around Naruto had been the Kyuubi the whole time. Naruto looked at the gathered cages. Isn't this something? All of Konoha's cages together. You broke the seal. Hiruzen demanded in a rage. I did, Naruto replied. I did this after I was banished from the Leaf by your successor. You were banished from the Leaf? Hashirama asked, now interested in Naruto's backstory. What was your crime? Being a hero, Naruto replied. Konoha favored a potential traitor over me. That and because I was Kurama's jailer, and that both Tsunade and Jiraiya blamed the death of my parents on me, as did Hiruzen for the death of his wife. Long story short, a former student of my father's thought to have been Kia, returned and unleashed Kurama onto the village as my mother was giving birth to me. My mother died from complications surrounding her birth and my father had to use the Shiki Fujin to seal Kurama in me at the cost of his life. Tobirama nodded. A noble sacrifice, he said. Naruto scoffed. Konoha didn't seem to think so. Neither did Sarutobi or those two idiots. My father's last wish was for the leaf to see me as a hero. But I was denied my inheritance by Sarutobi, and the village treated me like a virtual pariah. But that is just the tip of the iceberg, Lord Nadime. Sorobi and Shimura wanted to make me into Konoha's weapon, but died as a result of sealing Orochimaru's arms with the Shiki Fujin. Sarutobi's scheme soon fell onto Tsunade and Jiraiya. He turned to Orochimaru. Sasuke Uchiha was assigned to Cell 7, the same as me. He was seduced by the promise of power from Orochimaru and had defected from Konoha as a result. Tsunade had ordered a retrieval team to go and recapture Sasuke before he could make it to Orochimaru. It's true, as much as hate to admit, Orochimaru conceded. While his teammates fought my Sound 4, Naruto had fought Sasuke at the Valley of the End. Naruto had defeated Sasuke and brought him back home. Instead of being recognized as a hero, he was instead blamed for Sasuke trying to leave. He was banished, and Tsunade even went as far as to send out Anbu and Hunter Nins to kill him. That was when he had disappeared. His smirk deepened. Your own granddaughter and great-niece banished a hero and pardoned the traitor. The two male Senju turned to Sarutobi and the other two Sannin. Is this true? You banished Mito's descendant? He demanded. They did, Kushina said. At the cost of raising Whirlpool Country and Uzushiogakure on Sarutobi's orders. You sold out the Uzumaki clan. My family. All for what? The chance for Konoha to regain control of Kurama. Good thing that I didn't fully trust you, which is why I had Takuma and nearly all of Uzushiogakure relocate back to the west, after eliminating the invading shinobi and dressing them up in Uzu's shinobi uniforms. Orochimaru and Sasuke stood on the sidelines, watching this drama play out. This is very interesting, the snake thought. I wonder how this will play out. Sasuke, in the meantime, was thinking along the lines of, hope the Dobi gets himself killed. While you thought that the Uzumaki was nearly extinct, they were in the west, out of sight, out of mind. Of course, Mom could not send word to Uncle Takuma, as she knew that you were watching her like a hawk, Naruto finished. Jiraiya growled. Naruto had all but confirmed that Kushina had deceived him, the great spymaster of Konoha. Even Hiruzen, who had signed off on the order, was irate that the Yondaime's wife had played both him and Jiraiya. The power of the Kyuubi belonged to the leaf, the one-armed sage shouted. There was no way that I, nor Hiruzen-sensei, would allow the Uzumaki to take what was rightfully ours. He pointed to Kushina. You were only protected because you were Minato's wife. Minato had heard enough. The yellow flash of Konoha slugged his former sensei right in the jaw, knocking him over Teakettle, the toad sage landing flat on his back. Minato was more than angry. He was downright furious at the blatant disregard of his final wishes in regards to his son. He was irate over the betrayal that Konoha had done to himself, his wife and his son. I trusted you, Jiraiya, Minato said. You were like a father figure to me. And you go and you do this. You and Tsunade betrayed not only your godson, my son, but you and Sarutobi damned him to a life of misery and pain. Naruto snorted. You really are a piece of work, Jiraiya. So much for honoring their sacrifice. He turned to Hashirama and Tobirama. I had every intention of letting Konoha self-destruct on their own through the choices they made. Payback for betraying me and my family. But that damned Warhawk and his two buddies on the council decided to send Sai and a hit squad of his root Anbu to try and not only assassinate me, but also my wife, the 4 clans who had defected from here, and the Imperial Council when I refused terms for an alliance. Tsunade's eyes widened, as did Jiraiya's and Sarutobi's. This entire mess was Danzu's fault. Koharu and Hanmura on the other hand, continued the Emperor, let's just say that they were long overdue for retirement. I decided to be nice enough to leave Danzo for Sasuke. Tsunade and the others immediately caught the hidden meaning. Naruto had killed them. Tsunade mentally cursed to herself, as she had written off their deaths as accidental and in the case of Koharu, natural causes. Aside from his crimes of attempted regicide, Danzo also has secrets of his own. I thought that you were under the influence of the Sharingan he has implanted underneath those bandages, but as it turns out, that was not the case, Naruto continued, his own eyes morphing into the Rinnegan. I know because of my own bloodline, which I can detect other bloodlines and identify whether or not people are under a genjutsu. Shimura not only has the Sharingan, but also has a special arm hidden underneath his robes containing not only multiple Sharingans, but also DNA harvested from the body of the first Hokage. Hashirama's eyes narrowed, as did Tobirama's own. Power? Oh, she is a seductive mistress, Naruto continued. She is an addictive thrill. One taste of it and the weak-minded are left yearning for more. It can drive certain people mad. Orochimaru, Danzo, Sarutobi, even Tsunade. With such great power comes even greater responsibility. You and your brother knew that. My father knew that. Lord Shadaime, you once preached about the will of fire. The will of fire has been extinguished at the hands of your former student and those of his own students, one of which is your own granddaughter. Yes. Hashirama looked visibly disturbed at this chain of events. It appears so. Grandfather. No, don't listen to him. Tsunade attempted to defend herself. The brat is lying. I told you before, old hag, Naruto shot back. I never lie. His smirk deepened. Want to know just how bad you underestimated me? You got a sample of it back in Suna. But this could count as my masterpiece. He turned to Jiraiya. For a spy master, he obviously did not see this coming. Then again, neither did the both of you. Imagine that, the demon of Konoha, the Dobi, manipulating not only Konoha's greatest spy master, but also the Godime Hokage of Konoha and the Snake Sanin. Be careful as to how you speak, boy, Orochimaru hissed. You may be strong, but you are not stronger than me. Now that's no way to thank the person who had delivered to you the key to immortality, Naruto chided, wagging a finger at the snake. Did you really think that Sasuke came to your side willingly? Of course not. Tsunade's eyes widened at this revelation, as did Jiraiya's own. I knew it, Kabuto said. I had my suspicions, but I did not have any proof. You manipulated Sasuke into defecting from Konoha. Amazing what blackout orders detailing the Uchiha massacre and Sasuke's role into creating a Uchiha clan subservient to only the Hokage can do, Naruto confessed. Then again, it was easy to make that idiot think that he was not as much of an elite as he thought himself to be. Sasuke growled as his eyes shifted into the Sharingan. Naruto had played him for a fool yet again. The Kumite back in the Empire, you designed it solely just to humiliate me. Naruto shook his head. Actually, I didn't. I just manipulated the tournament so you would end up fighting Rasu. The fact that you managed to get as far as you did was a miracle in itself. You should feel honored, Sasuke. Thanks to me, you will get a place in history as the man who brought about Konoha's downfall. A spiteful, bitter, spoiled Uchiha, although I will gladly take the credit for destroying the leaf. Asuma, having been silent for the duration of this confrontation, balked. You used us, all of us, just so you could destroy Konoha. Don't you just love it when a plan comes together? I sure do. This was something that Hinata and I had came up with while we were fighting in the unification wars as a joke. But once we united the lands, we gave it some more serious thought. But before we could deal with the leaf, there was Obito and the Akatsuki, as they would more than likely come after me for having the Biju in my possession. Obito invading Suna gave me the excuse needed to go to war, as Suna is an ally. Once Obito and the Akatsuki was wiped out, I could finally focus on Konoha. Hiruzen had heard enough. Madness in his eyes, he charged at Naruto, as did Asuma, brandishing his bloodied trench knives. However, Kurama intervened. Two of her fox tails had speared the resurrected father and son and lifted them into the air. As the Konoha side watched in horror, save for the two Senju brothers and Orochimaru, Kurama incinerated both men, reducing them to charred bones. The special kunai designed by Orochimaru to control them fell to the ground, charred from the intense heat. Sensei! Jiraiya shouted in horror. Goodbye, Hiruzen Sarutobi, Naruto sniped. Give my regards to Koharu and Hanmura. Jiraiya, at that moment, saw red. You devil. The enraged super pervert screamed, forming a Rasengan in his hand, and charged at the Emperor, who slid a pair of Hiroshin kunai, one black, the other the classic Trikunai, in his hands. Sidestepping the Rasengan, Naruto impaled Jiraiya with the Trikunai in his left hand. Jiraiya's eyes bulged as the Rasengan dispersed as he felt the intense pain in his gut, looking at the man who in his mind, looked so much like the man whose son he had forsaken along with most of Konoha. That's for my parents who you betrayed, Naruto snarled. He then shoved the Trikunai even deeper. That's for the Uzumaki clan, who you tried to exterminate. He raised the second kunai and drove it into Jiraiya's neck. And this is from me. You and I. Naruto yanked out the Trikunai out of Jiraiya's gut and kicked Jiraiya back. Jiraiya died, looking at the darkening night sky. As he died, the last thing he had seen was the faces of Minato and Kushina, looking at him with nothing but disdain. And then, there were two, Naruto mused, turning to Orochimaru. Even though I have no love for Konoha, you are still a threat. The main reason why you are here is to save me the trouble of invading Otogakure. What better way to eliminate all of my family's enemies than to have them all together in the same place? Is that so? Orochimaru retorted. He turned to Kabuto, Kakashi and the two Hokages. Kill him, he ordered. We'll send his head to his wife. Kabuto nodded, while Hashirama and Tobirama turned and faced the Emperor. The two Senju prepared to use their Mokoden to ensnare the Emperor and the Biju Queen, while Kakashi prepared to face off against his former sensei. But Naruto was not known as the unpredictable maverick shinobi for nothing. Raising the bloody kunai, he flung it at Kakashi, which was followed by Hiraishin no Jutsu. One crimson flash later, and Naruto was holding the kunais with the special talismans attached to them which Orochimaru used to control Hashirama and Tobirama in one hand, and his unsheathed O-katana in the other. Naruto had yanked them out of the two cages, right before Sasuke and Kakashi had both been sledgehammered back from punches to the face by the young emperor. Kabuto stood there for a split second. Then his glasses fell to the ground, nearly cut in two, which was followed by Kabuto himself, Naruto having vertically bisected Orochimaru's right-hand man. Try and come back from that, Naruto said. Minato could not be any more prouder of his son. Impressive, he complimented. Our village has done this boy wrong, brother, the Nadaime said as he began to fade into dust. Hashirama nodded. He is in the right to destroy Konoha. This is not the village we have died for. Before fading away completely, he addressed Tsunade. You are a disappointment to the clan, Tsunade. Now, Tsunade and Orochimaru closed in on the Namikaze family, with the surviving Konoha shinobi, Tsunade having lost any and all sense of sanity following her grandfather's denouncement of her, and Orochimaru, Kusanagi in hand. Kakashi had retrieved a pair of kunai from his pouch, while Sasuke summoned lightning to his Chikudo, wanting to get in on the action of finally eliminating the Dobi once and for all. Naruto, Minato, and Kurama responded by letting loose with a torrent of black Hiraishin kunai, the ones with the Hiraishin seals etched onto the blade, at the surviving Sound and Leaf shinobi, as well with the classic Trikunai. As expected, Sasuke, Tsunade and Orochimaru had dodged the rain of steel, but some of their subordinates were not as lucky. Hiraishin no Jutsu. Minato Namikaze had become famous for using the Flying Thunder God to annihilate a sizable portion of Iwagakure shinobi. Now, Konoha and Sound had gotten a full taste of the combined wrath of the Yondaime and of the Emperor. First a crimson flash, followed by a yellow flash, and the dying started. When the flash faded, carnage was left behind. Kakashi Hatake was slain, his soul sealed. Kushina and Kurama had cut down a number of shinobi from both sides. Naruto had cut down Sakura Haruno and Tsunade and Orochimaru were mortally wounded, Naruto placing a special seal designed to nullify his powers before severing his spine. Tsunade had been stabbed repeatedly by Kushina, the wounds causing her to bleed internally. Naruto, on the other hand, did not want to deal with the Uchiha, as he had already beaten him 3 times already. He wasn't going to fight him, but he wasn't going to outright kill him. Naruto simply slashed at the tendons in his arms and legs, thus rendering his former teammate a cripple, but not for very long. The rest of the attacking shinobi, having seen the power of the Hiraishin who had survived Minato and Kushina's assault, retreated deeper into the village. Behold, Naruto began, arms spread out, looking around the ruined village, the end result of your betrayal. Naruto. Tsunade pleaded. Please, don't destroy Konoha. I'm sorry for betraying you, please, show mercy. Mercy. I don't show mercy to traitors. Now, it's time to end this, Naruto stated calmly as he retrieved Sasuke's Chikudo and Orochimaru's Kusanagi as trophies of war. Turning to the dying Tsunade and Orochimaru, he gave him his final words, ignoring Sasuke's screams. The both of you won't die just yet. You will live long enough to see Konoha burn. I think what I have in store for Konoha's fate is fitting. Farewell. The Biju Queen and the Namikaze family then vanished via Shunshin. Outside of Konohagakure. Funny how things come full circle, Kurama mused, now in fox form, just as she was all those years ago. Only this time, the mountain-sized kitsune was now a willing participant in Konoha's destruction. Had Konoha had honored your father's request, and favored you instead of the Uchiha runt, then this would not have been their fate. Naruto and his parents was seated on Kurama's head. I know. But there is no time for regrets. The leaf has made their bed. Now it's time for them to lie in it. Minato, on the other hand, looked sad as he watched his home village in his final moments. He had once believed in his village. He had believed in the will of fire. When Naruto had told him of how Konoha had become corrupted, he did not believe him at first. But then, he saw it with his own eyes. He had seen and heard of Jiraiya's betrayal. Kushina placed one hand over her husband's own. Minato. I'm sorry, but this had to be done. It's hard for me too. Minato sighed. I know. He turned to his son. Naruto. You know what to do. His son nodded. Kurama. Level the village. Gladly, the fox replied. The Biju's signature attack was the Bijudama, the Biju bomb. It is also considered the strongest of the Biju's techniques. Now that Minato Namikaze's soul was released by the Shinigami, Kurama's yin chakra had been restored, Kurama was back at full power. And the power of the Biju Queen was a terrifying sight to behold if you were on the wrong side. Kurama opened her maw and began to summon both positive and negative chakra, compressing it inside her mouth. For the Biju, unleashing a perfect Bijudama was tricky, as the chakra needed to be balanced at an 8:2 ratio lest the Bijudama could backfire. Yuki found that out the hard way shortly after the 6 paths had separated them, which had resulted in a dislocated jaw for the 8 tails. The 10 tails Bijudama could level an entire village. Kurama was no different. Her Bijudama was just as destructive. Fire! Naruto calmly commanded. Kurama fired the Bijudama. Orochimaru was dead. This Tsunade knew. Surviving Konoha and Oto Shinobi ran about, trying to find a way out of the doomed village, but the exits were blocked, Naruto having trapped the shinobi inside via exploding tags, blocking their escape route. Sasuke Uchiha was alive, but not for long. Tsunade had guessed that he would bleed out in less than 5 minutes. Tsunade looked at the bodies of Orochimaru and Jiraiya. She was the last of the legendary Sannin alive, but not for long, as her grandfather's final words echoed in her mind. You are a disappointment to the clan, Tsunade. How did this happen? Tsunade thought. How in the hell did Naruto outsmart all of us? This was not supposed to happen. Konoha is supposed to be the strongest of the villages. Where did we go wrong? Sasuke was thinking along the lines of, this can't be happening. I don't want to die, showing that through his facade of being a superior Uchiha, he was in fact, afraid of dying. Those were their final thoughts as they were overcome with a blinding flash of light, and knew no more. So ended the legendary Sannin of Konoha. So ended the Senju. So ended the life of Sasuke Uchiha. The Biju bomb, in the form of a black mass of chakra, detonated over Konohagakure, instantly turning night into day, the night sky lighting with the radiance of 1,000 suns. Any surviving shinobi that was caught in the flash was instantly reduced to carbon as a result of the flash. Others who were hiding inside the buildings within Konoha were crushed as the blast wave expanded, turning stone, wood, concrete and glass into shrapnel, shredding and impaling any and everything in its path. Not even the Hokage mountain was left standing, as that was also pulverized into oblivion. Only the training fields were left unscathed from Kurama's blast, although it did rattle the critters in the forest of death. As the light from the blast faded, the village of Konohagakure no Sato was awash in a sea of flames. It was truly to anyone who had lived through the ordeal, hell. To whoever once lived here in Konohagakure no Sato. Quote. Naruto's chakra-masked voice carried on the wind. I curse its remnants, from its remaining shinobi to its surviving civilians, and their descendants. I condemn the Konoha remnant to wander the elemental countries in shame and guilt for the crimes they had committed in the name of the village. You will wander, looking for a new place to start over, but you will have no rest. You will have no reprieve. Until the last of the remnant dies out, you will never have no form of peace. With his declaration done, Naruto and his parents hopped off of Kurama's head. The Biju Queen assumed her human form. Naruto turned to his parents. So, I guess this is goodbye. Kushina nodded sadly. Yes. The Shinigami said that this was good for only 24 hours. She embraced her son. I am so proud of you, Naruto. Naruto smiled. Thanks, Mom. Minato stepped forward and patted his son on the shoulder. Sochi, you have exceeded my expectations. For you to become Emperor of the West. You have done me proud. Thanks, Dad. Kushina turned to Kurama. Watch over him and his family, Kurama. Consider it a request from an old friend. Kurama nodded. I will, Kushina. Moments later, the clones dispersed, while their souls ascended to a higher plane of existence. Naruto and Kurama watched them until they were out of sight. Naruto felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning around, he faced Kurama. Your wife and children are waiting for you, she said. Let's go home. Naruto nodded. He was drained. All he wanted to do was go back to Kimen and sleep. Kurama activated the Demon's Gate Jutsu and the pair stepped through. Behind them, Konoha burned. Come the morning, Konoha would be nothing but a ruined wasteland. Imperial Complex, within the Imperial Palace. Is it over? Hinata's voice had broken Naruto out of his thoughts as he looked inside the bedroom that Minato and Mocha shared. Naruto turned to his wife, who was in her shirt and shorts and nodded. It's over. Operation Scorched Leaf is a success. Konoha has been destroyed. The Sannin are dead. Sasuke Uchiha is dead. Hinata nodded. Despite everything, Konoha was their hometown. It had pained them to see that Konoha had become corrupted, but in the end, they had chosen their own paths. Konoha had become a threat, and had to be neutralized. Through this action, the Empire, and the East, would remain safe. Suno would retain its status as the strongest shinobi village, while Kazuhana's shinobi village will take Konoha's place as one of the 5. There would be no power vacuum, as Naruto had made sure of that. Sasuke Uchiha would be forever remembered as the shinobi would had brought down the leaf. Only he and his closest allies knew the truth. With Konoha gone, Naruto and Hinata can now look to the future of the Western Empire. The Emperor's wrath was finally sated. The Namikaze dynasty would rule until the end of the shinobi age. No one knows the whereabouts of their descendants, but one thing is for certain. Their exploits will not be forgotten, as they are recorded in the annals of history. The speaker was a woman in her late 20s, early 30s. Her audience was an archaeology class in Tokyo University. The woman was very voluptuous, her figure showing from her business suit and skirt combination, the pair of black heels on her feet. Short dark hair framed her face, the bangs covering one eye, a la Rosemary's MGS4 hairdo. Her uncovered lavender eye with pupil scanned the captivated audience. Their descendants have not died out, as they are still alive to this very day, unaware of the legacy that they contain. But as with all legends and tales, it is just waiting to be discovered, she said as she closed the book from which she was reading from. One of her students raised her hand. The professor acknowledged it with a nod. Yes, Miyabi. A freshman student asked her question. Professor Kujikawa, what happened to the refugees from Konoha? The professor, one Mayumi Kujikawa, shrugged her shoulders. No one knows for sure. Once they were on the boat to the unknown continent, they were never heard from again. More than likely, they had assimilated and settled there. A second student raised her hand. Professor, how do you know so much about this subject? Kujikawa smiled. I've been into ancient history for as long as I can remember. It's a passion of mine. She raised the book, which was titled History of the Unified West. The book itself was authored by both herself and her husband, who was a famous writer and lecturer of literature. Most people could not agree if it was fact or fiction. But what they did agree on was that it was a very good read. The ninja system in both East and West could not escape the changing times, and ended up collapsing, Kujikawa continued, but the Namikaze dynasty continued to rule, as they too changed with the times. In the end, it was not an uprising of the people that had brought the Namikaze clan to ruin. So what was it? Miyabi asked. Nature, Kujikawa replied. Mother Nature herself. The Laja Mountains were always a volatile region, but in the reign of the last emperor, Naruto 12 Namikaze, the Laja Mountains erupted, which triggered a massive earthquake. Days later, the unified West was engulfed in a tsunami, the land sinking into the ocean. Kujikawa remembered that even all too well. Both her and her husband had assisted in the evacuation of the imperial capital, knowing well that the days of the unified West were numbered. Aside from that, they also pilfered the Namikaze vaults underneath the imperial palace using several storage scrolls to seal up the chests of gold, but leaving more than enough cash to their clan, so that they can rebuild once again. They also took family heirlooms, jutsu scrolls and weapons that had been collected over the years. The reason being, Mayumi Kujikawa was just an alias. One of many in her long life. Her birth name was Hinata Hyuga, now Hinata Namikaze. Before another student could ask a question, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. But more importantly, the end of the day. It was time to go home. As the students piled out of the classroom, Hinata sat down in a chair and took a moment to reflect. Her hand rubbed absently on the mark where Naruto had bit her on their wedding night. It was shortly thereafter that Katami had taken both Naruto and Hinata to the side and explained the totality of the mark. As the both of you are mated, you will have fringe benefits. One of which is a long life. The Uzumaki were known for their long lifespans. When the both of you marked each other, that lifespan has increased 1,000-fold. Kurama. Last she heard, the Nine Tails ran a curio shop in Hokkaido. They had not aged a day over 30, resorting to using henges to make themselves look older, or in some cases, relocate to a different area entirely. This was the 7th time that Naruto and Hinata were back in Japan. The last place they spent 30 years in was in Hong Kong, where their descendants from Mocha's bloodline resided. Minato's bloodline resided in Japan, and one of them were in Hinata's class. Of course, aside from Mocha and Minato, Naruto and Hinata had countless children over the years. Some of their lines still existed, while others were extinct. Their daughter, Yumi, was a student in elementary school, a recent addition to the Namikaze bloodline. Over the thousands of years, Naruto and Hinata had many occupations from assassin to daimyo to shogun to businessman. It was only recently that Naruto decided to write his memoirs, of which Hinata had been reading to the class. As for the other Jinchuriki, they were still alive as well. Utakata, they had left while he was in Hong Kong. Roshi and Han were in Okinawa, Yugito had settled in Seoul, Gaara made his home in the Mojave Desert, posing as an insane survivalist, B was somewhere in South America, and Fu made her home in England. Gathering her things and placing them into a shoulder bag, Hinata had decided that she had spent enough time walking down memory lane. Her husband was waiting for her. Tokyo University, campus. He stood in the midst of the students as they walked past him. 6 feet tall, with undisciplined reddish hair, a la Chris RE5 hairdo, blue eyes, his muscular frame hidden underneath the black longcoat and dark business suit. It was winter and the Christmas holidays had just begun. The cold had never really bothered him, being a former Jinchuriki. He was known as Takeshi Kujikawa to most people. A respected professor of literature here at Todai, as well as an accomplished writer. But to a select few, he was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Naruto didn't have to wait long for his wife to make her presence known. Bundled up in her own overcoat and scarf, shoulder bag slung over one shoulder, Hinata Namikaze approached her husband with a smile on her face. Been waiting long, love? Nah. Just got here, Haim. Ready? He asked, extending his arm out. Hinata responded by slipping her arm through Naruto's own. The couple then walked off, until they were just another couple heading home for the holidays. Maybe one day, the emperor will rise once again to lead, but now, he was just a family man ready to spend the holidays with his wife and daughter. The legacy of the Namikaze clan will continue. End. So ends Wrath of the Emperor. But there is an omake that I forgot to add in the last chapter. Here is. Hope you enjoy it. Omake. Hokuto no Naruto, Part 2. Snafu's notes. I forgot to add this in the last chapter. Sasuke growled as his eyes shifted into the Sharingan. Naruto had played him for a fool yet again. The Kumite back in the Empire, you designed it solely just to humiliate me. Naruto shook his head. Actually, I didn't. I just manipulated the tournament so you would end up fighting Rasu. The fact that you managed to get as far as you did was a miracle in itself. You should feel honored, Sasuke. Thanks to me, you will get a place in history as the man who brought about Konoha's downfall. A spiteful, bitter, spoiled Uchiha, although I will gladly take the credit for destroying the leaf. Asuma, having been silent for the duration of this confrontation, balked. You used us, all of us, just so you could destroy Konoha. Don't you just love it when a plan comes together? I sure do. This was something that Hinata and I had came up with while we were fighting in the unification wars as a joke. But once we united the lands, we gave it some more serious thought. But before we could deal with the leaf, there was Obito and the Akatsuki, as they would more than likely come after me for having the Biju in my possession. Obito invading Suna gave me the excuse needed to go to war, as Suna is an ally. Once Obito and the Akatsuki was wiped out, I could finally focus on Konoha. Hiruzen had heard enough. Madness in his eyes, he charged at Naruto, as did Asuma, brandishing his bloodied trench knives. However, Kurama intervened. 2 of her fox tails had speared the resurrected father and son and lifted them into the air. As the Konoha side watched in horror, save for the 2 Senju brothers and Orochimaru, Kurama incinerated both men, reducing them to charred bones. The special kunai designed by Orochimaru to control them fell to the ground, charred from the intense heat. Sensei! Jiraiya shouted in horror. Goodbye, Hiruzen Sarutobi, Naruto sniped. Give my regards to Koharu and Hanmura. Jiraiya, at that moment, saw red. You devil! The enraged super pervert screamed, forming a Rasengan in his hand, and charged at the Emperor, who just simply stood there. The expression on his face was one of boredom. Naruto sidestepped the Rasengan and hooked Jiraiya's arm in an armbreaker hold. Sure enough, Naruto snapped the super pervert's arm at the elbow, which was followed by thwack. Tsunade's eyes widened, as did those of Sakura, the Senju brothers, Orochimaru and even Sasuke. The reason being was that Naruto had jammed both his thumbs into Jiraiya's temples. What did you do to me? Jiraiya whispered. Nothing fancy, replied Naruto as if he was discussing the weather. This attack is called Zankaiken, the Fist of Penitence. A simple technique, really. All I did was struck your pressure points in your temple, which are called Toi. Want to know what happens when I remove my thumbs, Jiraiya? You will have exactly 7 seconds to live. Once the 7 seconds are up, you will split vertically in half and your body will explode. All in all, a very painful death. Impossible. You should know by now that I make the impossible possible. Word of advice, Jiraiya. Better use those 7 seconds to ask for forgiveness for what you had done to my parents and to my clan. Your 7 seconds begins. Naruto paused to remove his thumbs. Now. Jiraiya stumbled backwards and fell on his. 7 seconds, Jiraiya, Naruto said. 6 seconds. No, no, shouted Jiraiya. I can't die. Not yet. 5 seconds. I still got so much to do. I have to release the newest Ika. I still haven't peeped on Tsunade without her catching me, let alone get her in bed with me. Tsunade looked at him in disgust. 3 seconds. And I still haven't met Murasaki Shibiku. So much for doing the right thing. Time's up. Goodbye, Jiraiya. Jiraiya froze in place. Then he began to scream as his body gruesomely split in two before exploding in a shower of blood, bone and gore, some of it splattering on Tsunade and Orochimaru. Even Hashirama and Tobirama looked shocked as to what had happened. You are getting better at that, Kit, Kurama noted, having used her tails to swat aside pieces of Jiraiya that was sent her way. She then noticed Tsunade charging in, fists raised, ready to knock Naruto's head off while he was distracted. Kushina noticed this as well, as she quickly reacted. Naruto found himself standing beside his father, while Kushina faced off against Tsunade. Tsunade Senju was 1/3 of Konoha's legendary Sannin. She was a renowned medic ninja and known not only for her infamous brute strength, but also her bad luck when it comes to gambling. She had relied mostly on her brute strength, and not more on the Senju style of taijutsu, which she was going to pay for dearly. You dare betray me, Tsunade shouted as she swung her fists at the red-hot habanero, not noticing that Kushina had casually tapped several pressure points on her wrists. You betrayed my family, Kushina replied, her voice calm, but to anyone who knew her Kushina was furious. The Uzumaki never forgive those who betrayed their clan, including those who had Uzumaki blood in their veins. For that, you must pay. She then smirked at her aunt. You really think that you can hit me with those hands? That caused Tsunade to stop. She remembered Kushina tapping her wrists as she was dodging her punches. No. She didn't. Kushina nodded. Yeah, I did. Tsunade's fingers began to swell. Then her hands exploded, spraying blood all over, the Godime Hokage screaming in pain from the sneak attack. But Kushina was not finished. There was a special place in hell for those who betrayed the Uzumaki, and she was going to send Tsunade there. Ta 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 wata. Wham 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 ka pow. Minato knew what Kushina was capable of. She was not known as the Red Death for nothing. A barrage of rapid-fire punches, hundreds of them from the look of things, struck Tsunade repeatedly before Kushina finished the barrage with a punch to the face, knocking Tsunade down. Only when did Tsunade got back to her feet, did she notice that something was wrong. Her body jerked violently before her legs began to walk backwards of their own will. My legs. I can't control my legs. Uzumaki Ryu Ugi, Kushina began, Zenkai Sekiho Ken. I struck the Shitsugen pressure point on your body, Tsunade. You will walk backwards without you unable to control your legs. Do me a favor and walk yourself straight into hell. You traitor. Tsunade screamed. I'd be more concerned about what I'm walking into, Naruto said, pointing behind the Godime. Tsunade turned around, and saw that she was walking directly towards a burning building. Despite her attempt to get her legs under control, they were in the end, futile. In desperation, she tried to appeal to Naruto. Naruto, please, don't let this happen to me. I'm sorry for betraying you. Please, show mercy. Sorry, replied the Emperor. I'm all out of mercy. I ran out of it when you banished me. Sakura, ever the loyal apprentice, tried to stop Tsunade from walking into the burning building. Even until the bitter end, Sakura tried to rescue her mentor, only to end up being burned alive along with her mentor, their screams echoing throughout Konoha as they perished inside the inferno. As Orochimaru was distracted by watching Tsunade die, Minato had snuck around and freed the Senju brothers from Orochimaru's control and left their souls to rest. Yo! Snake man! Orochimaru turned around and felt two fingers pressed up against his forehead. Looking into the face of Naruto, Orochimaru felt complacent in the fact that as he was immortal, Naruto's attacks would have no effect on him, unlike Jiraiya. So, Orochimaru began, "Do you really think that you can kill me like you did to Jiraiya? I am immortal." Hidan said the same thing, Naruto replied as he removed his fingers from Orochimaru's skull. "This is the same technique I used to kill him with. It's called Kaikatsu Ken. Let's see how your immortality holds up when your skeleton explodes from your body." "You're bluffing." Unfortunately, Orochimaru soon found out that Naruto was not bluffing. His body began to distort and contort, until finally, his skeleton blew out from the back, the skeleton crashing into a nearby wall, while the rest of his body fell into a heap. The last thing he thought before dying was how in the hell could this happen to him. So ended the Sannin. Kurama, on the other hand, got a measure of payback by incinerating Sasuke and Kabuto. When Kakashi tried to use the Sharingan on Kurama, he too was incinerated. So ended the lives of Kabuto Yakushi and Sasuke Uchiha once and for all. That was so satisfying, Kurama said as she kicked what was Sasuke's skull to the side. All part end. Thanks for listening.